Welcome, everybody, to the January 4th, 2021 meeting of the Arlington County Board. Happy New Year. Before we get started, we have to, colleagues, again, adopt the resolution as we do every month for our meetings. And this is our resolution to find the need to conduct, in this case, our January 4th, 2020 County Board meeting as electronically. And so it refers to, in the whereases, the March 12th order of the governor and the March 13th, these are 2020 orders of the county manager declaring local and state and local emergencies, and citing our ability to meet electronically when it's needed to conduct our business. And it's finding that we believe we do need to conduct the business of the county, and we need to do it virtually. So I will move that. It can be found online. We do it every month, and I will move that and ask for a second.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Ms. Crystal?
Aye.
Mr. DeFranti?
Aye.
Mr. Carantonis?
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey?
Aye.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Garvey? Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right, folks, so we will get on. And this is our meeting where we have our organizational meeting, but and I will, in just a couple of minutes, call for nominations for chair for 2021. But before I do that, I do want to take just a few moments to recognize some of what we, and by that I mean our staff, our employees, our residents, and you, my colleagues, accomplished to help get Arlington through 2021, more or less, 2020, get through the year, last year, more or less in one piece. And of course, yes, people and businesses are still struggling. Students are still not back in school. We're just getting our vaccinations underway. However, as we move forward into 2021, I really want to make sure we remember how much we have accomplished this past year, both as an organization and as a community. So 2020 was a year that challenged us as no other in memory. And up until this point, I think many of us would have said it was 9/11 or the '08 recession, perhaps, or bringing Amazon HQ2 here to Arlington, that were among our most challenging years. And 2020, in many ways, was all those years on steroids. Early on, of course, we lost our dear colleague and vice chair, Eric Gutschall, who only attended our January meetings before he became ill. And his loss was a pain I think we all felt throughout the year, and we still miss him. As we know, the pandemic, of course, really hit in March, and we moved to virtual meetings. And remember when we all thought COVID maybe would be fading away by last summer. But by the end of the first quarter of 2020, the whole county organization had pivoted to working virtually as much as possible. And what was possible was far more than any of us could have imagined a year ago, I think. Our primary focus became dealing with the pandemic. As we worked to try to slow the spread, we also expanded our social safety net in order to try to make sure our residents, every one of them, had a roof over their heads, food on the table, and access to health care. Our nonprofits and volunteers stepped up like never before to partner with our county workforce, many of whom found themselves doing jobs that they had never done before, and sometimes on top of doing the jobs that they regularly do, but they were doing them in new and unfamiliar ways. Of course, in spring, our carefully crafted budget and CIP documents were suddenly irrelevant. And then on May 28th, George Floyd was murdered. And this country that had tried to deny and overlook systemic racism could not deny it anymore. And I think we saw this summer how the intentional equity work that we began under our former chair, Christian Dorsey, helped us to respond to the outcry and emotional pain that overshadowed really everything else for a while this year, even the pandemic. On June 1st, we saw our police get caught up in yet another effort by the administration to manipulate a situation to maintain power, and we called our police home. So now, of course, we are caught up in the chaotic federal approach to vaccination. But I know we will get through the next challenges because of the unparalleled work of our staff and ongoing support from the entire Arlington community. The strong leadership of our county manager and his team, as well as the resilient nonprofit community that we've got, and the sense of civic responsibility that has always been a hallmark of Arlington County. That all brought us through 2020, and it will take us through 2021 and beyond. So I want to say thank you, Mr. Schwartz, our manager. Thank you so much for your leadership this year and everything you and your outstanding team have done this past year. Thank you to all our employees, especially our own board staff, board office staff, the ATV crew, working so hard behind the scenes to make these meetings happen. It looks easy, but I know it's not. And thank you to everyone in Arlington County who stepped up and did your part and more this year and continue to do so. Thank you so much. And finally, thank you, colleagues, for your hard work and support throughout this 2020 last year. And this is a great board team. It's been a real privilege to be your chair this year. And with that, I would very much like to take nominations for chair for 2021. Do I have a nomination?
Madam Chair, I do have a nomination.
Miss Crystal.
Colleagues, I'd like to nominate Matt DeFerranti as chair of the Arlington County Board for the 2021 year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any other nominations? All right. Seeing none. Ms. Crystal, do you want to speak to your motion at all?
I would. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So I believe that one of the most undersung attributes in an elected official is earnestness. It is rare to find, particularly in a moment where the cynicism directed at those in public office makes it really difficult for politicians to retain their optimism, their idealism, their authenticity. But our colleague, Mr. DeFerranti, has earnestness in spades. And this is a moment, a pandemic, a reckoning over racial injustice that calls for deep patience, that calls for a belief that we can do hard things if we do them together, that calls for a clear articulation of our shared values and a true doggedness in working towards them. And so it is a moment that calls for a chair like Mr. DeFerranti. We have had an opportunity to see him these past couple years as our colleague politely yet indefatigably persist in addressing Arlingtonians' issues, be it flood damage or unpaid referees or tenant living conditions. We've watched his long-held vision for an Arlington free from childhood hunger become one of the most salient aspirations of this past year. We have seen him draw up energy upon hustle, upon more hours in the day from a well of hard work that seems to have no bottom. And I think that we've all felt grateful that his wonderful wife, Brooke, got engaged to Matt while he was already serving. So his commitment to Arlington 24/7 was already a known part of the package. And now it's time for us to see what Mr. DeFerranti can do as the captain of this county board team and as a chair for all of Arlington. And for me, I can't wait to see his leadership work begin in earnest.
Great pun, Ms. Crystal. Thank you. All right. Any other nominations? We said no. Any more comments? I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Ms. Crystal?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. DeFerranti?
Aye.
Good. Mr. Carantonis?
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey?
Aye.
Ms. Garvey says aye. Congratulations, Mr. DeFerranti. And if we were together, our next chair for 2021, if I were there, I'd pass you the gavel. So virtually, here it is. Take it away.
Thank you.
Gavel is yours.
The gavel will come, but for now it's a stapler. So thank you so much.
Innovations, good.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal, for the comments. I really appreciate it. I do think it's good that I found Brooke after I was on the board, for sure. So, and I just want to briefly say a word of thanks to you, Ms. Garvey, for being a deeply collaborative, steady hand and being relentless over this past year. You were the right person for this moment, and you were a great leader for us. And just a big thank you. And I'm certainly happy to open the floor, but I just wanted to start with my thanks to you for a great job, Libby Garvey.
Thank you all. I meant it. You guys are great. just great. Thank you.
It is absolutely a team. And so I am thrilled to be working with you. And we'll move to unless there are comments, we'll move to our election of our vice chair. Are there nominations?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Garvey.
I would like to nominate Katie Crystal for the position of vice chair.
Okay.
And I'll offer a second.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. We got the motion in, and hopefully Ms. Garvey will come back to us in short order. So we have a motion and a second, and would Mr. Dorsey or one of you wish to speak to the motion?
Well, certainly as the only live person as part of the making the motion who's currently active on screen, I will. Certainly Ms. Crystal had the opportunity, I believe it was in 2018, to lead our board, and did so with not only great aplomb and great efficiency, but also with great productivity. It was then that through her initiative on childcare that we were able to stand up a hugely significant body of work to tackle one of the most pervasive issues in our community. You'll remember it was through that process that we learned that childcare costs in Arlington were the highest in the country, not among the highest in the country, and the needs to combat not only the issues of supply, but also affordability, and making sure that those were available to people with all types of needs and circumstances required a huge Herculean lift on the part of our county government, involving multiple departments, including human services and planning, and a tremendously effective body of work that is ongoing. But she was more than just that one initiative. She capably led us on the regional stage as our chief spokesperson and collaborating on issues like transportation, working with our regional partners and having Arlington stand alone. And so it's with great confidence that she will not only be able to perform the role of vice chair, but that she will join you, Mr. DeFerranti, in a dynamic duo for leading Arlington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorsey. Well said. And I've certainly seen the leadership on the regional stage, and I'm thrilled to be partnering with Ms. Crystal this year. I'm also grateful for your leadership as chair in 2019, a very difficult year as well. So we have a great team. And what I propose to do is we will go ahead with the vote for vice chair. And once Ms. Garvey comes back, we'll give her an opportunity to add her vote to this vote. So on the question of vice chair, I will ask for a vote by name. Mr. Dorsey.
Aye.
Mr. Carantonis.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Phew. Mr. DeFerranti says aye as well. So we will come back and get Ms. Garvey's vote on vice chair. And now I think that may be her, so I'll just see if we can let her in.
Yeah, she's just trying to join via phone.
All
Ms.
right,
Garvey.
I'm here. Can anyone hear me? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
We absolutely can hear you, and you came at just the right time. We would like your vote on Ms. Crystal for vice chair.
Good. And can I speak to the motion first?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you, because I really am happy to nominate Ms. Crystal because she's now a seasoned member of the board. She did an excellent job as our chair in 2018. She holds several leadership positions in the region. She represents Arlington as chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and she's immediate past chair of the Operations Board of the Virginia Railway Express. Ms. Crystal also represents Arlington on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority and serves on the Human Services Policy Committee of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And finally, I do want to note that Ms. Crystal is now a mother. And although Carrie's not yet 2, and there are lots of parenting challenges ahead, I happen to be one of the people that agrees with Nancy Pelosi that raising children is one of the best ways to prepare for leadership. So I'm so pleased to be able to nominate her, and I'm so sorry I'm not able to do this in better form. But I would also like to add my vote aye, if that's what you need me to say.
Perfect. Thank you for your comments as well as your vote. And so on the vice chair, the motion carries 5-0. Katie Crystal, congratulations on being named vice chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you both for those really kind words.
Great. So we've after those two items, I just want to take a moment to shift gears a little bit and ask for your indulgence as we consider the last year in a slightly different way than the great opening that you offered, Ms. Garvey. I think it's important now, after a very busy year, to take a moment to recognize that Arlingtonians have lost a number of people to COVID-19. And so just very briefly, we've now lost 182 Arlington residents to this terrible virus. I'd ask that we take a moment of silence to recognize the absent members we've lost, our sisters, brothers, mothers, fathers, daughters, and sons, our grandparents, cousins, those who've left us this past year due to this terrible virus. Moment of silence, please. Thank you, colleagues. There's no way to replace, but we certainly want our fellow Arlingtonians to know that our thoughts are with you. And so we can never replace, but we will move on, but still know fellow Arlington residents that we are with you. And we are thinking of and mindful of your loss. Item will go on. There's no easy way to go on, but we will go on to the rest of our agenda. Item 3 is adoption of the calendar year 2021 County Board meeting schedule. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the 21 County Board meeting schedule. It is attached to the board report published and dated December 30th, 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded to accept the calendar year 2021 board meeting schedule. I'll call for a vote by name. Ms. Crystal?
Aye.
Mr. Karantonis?
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey?
Aye.
Ms. Garvey?
Aye.
And Mr. DeFerranti votes aye. So that by a vote of 5-0, we adopt the 2021 calendar. Our next item is adoption of the calendar year 2021 board meeting procedures. Colleagues, can I get a motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you. I would like to move that the county board adopt the calendar year 2021 meeting procedures as shown in attachment 1 to the board report dated December 30th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Mr. Dorsey, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, briefly, Mr. Chair. So the proposed meeting procedures that we are about to vote on for calendar year 2021 are incorporating procedures for virtual meetings when electronic meetings are allowed under the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia and our local county ordinances. So many of these practices we have instituted and perfected over the course of 2020. Those are now codified and displayed for all to understand as part of our calendar year 2021 meeting procedures. There are also some minor technical revisions to our current procedures to make them easier to understand and clarifying items that have been surfaced to us as being slightly ambiguous. The board report helpfully shows the changes from the prior year meeting procedures with both strike-throughs and underlines, and these will all be posted to the website upon adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Is there any discussion, colleagues? Great. It's been moved. We have a second, I believe. Did we? Yes, we covered a second. Thank you. We will do a vote on the motion. to adopt the 2021 County Board meeting procedures. Mr. Dorsey.
Aye.
Mr. Karantonis.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Garvey.
Aye.
And I vote, Mr. DeFranti votes aye as well. We've adopted item 4, our county board meeting procedures. Moving on to item 5. Colleagues, is there a motion regarding the procedures for budget and tax rate public hearings?
Mr. DeFranti.
Ms. Garvey.
Thank you. Hopefully the calendar, I have no idea what happened. Hopefully it'll hang in here for this motion. And I simply would like to move that we adopt the 2021 budget and tax rate hearing procedures with the revisions to incorporate virtual meeting procedures and minor technical revisions as attached to the board report dated December 30, 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Is there any discussion regarding the motion?
I'll simply add, Mr. Chair, that the virtual meeting procedure is very similar to what Mr. Dorsey said for his motion. The virtual meeting procedures are only relevant when virtual meetings are authorized by the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia and county ordinances, and all of the meeting schedule can be found online.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. Any other discussion, colleagues? Hearing none, I will just say briefly a thanks to Ms. Garvey as chair last year for working through the virtual procedures, and also our clerk for helping to make our transition, as well as all of the 8 Arlington TV, those who make these virtual meetings work well. So the question is on the motion. It's been moved and seconded. We'll call for a vote. Mr. Karantonis.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Garvey.
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey.
Aye.
And the chair, I vote, Mr. DeFranti votes aye as well. The motion carries 5-0. We've adopted the procedures for budget and tax rate public hearings. We're on now to item 6 in our agenda, adoption of the calendar year 2021 tie-breaking resolution. Colleagues, is there a motion?
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Go ahead.
So I move to adopt the 2021 tiebreaker resolution, which determines that there shall not be a tiebreaker whose duty it would be to cast the deciding vote in the case of a tie vote of the members of the Arlington County Board during this calendar year 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Mr. Karantonis, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, this has been a resolution that every year the board has been adopting. I think that this is proper to do so. We have 5 equal votes, and I believe that this is a proper way to advance. We have never needed that, and I hope we will never need this. So I believe that we have all the capacity to negotiate issues and to find solutions and make decisions properly without a privileged vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Well said. Any other discussion, colleagues? Thank you. We'll call for a vote. Mr. Karantonis, on
Aye.
Mr. Karantonis, thank you. Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Garvey.
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey.
Aye.
And Mr. DeFranti votes aye as well. The motion carries 5-0. We have adopted our decision to decline the option provided under Virginia Code for a tiebreaker resolution. Next, we will move on to item number 7 on our agenda, which is appointments. And I will read a motion, a series of appointments on our regional commissions, and also on our advisory group chairs and appointments. I'll start with the regional appointments, and I will make the motion myself. After reading these, I'll go through. There are several names, so I will start by moving that we reappoint Christian Dorsey to the Board of Directors of the Council of Governments, and that we reappoint Mr. Dorsey to the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board. We reappoint myself, Mr. DeFranti, to the Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee of COG. We reappoint Libby Garvey to the Chesapeake Bay and Water Resources Policy Committee. We appoint Mr. Karantonis to the Human Services Policy Committee of the Council of Governments. We appoint Mr. Karantonis to the Region Forward Coalition, and we reappoint Libby Garvey to the Region Forward Coalition. I will also move that we appoint to the Northern Virginia Regional Commission for a term ending December 31st, 2021. Mr. DeFerranti, myself, and Ms. Garvey to the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. I'll add to the motion that the Council of Government appointments, like our Northern Virginia Regional Commission appointments, expire on December 31st, 2021. Additionally, I will move that we appoint to the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission Mr. DeFerranti and his designee as the Washington, and designate him as the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority appointee from Arlington. Ms. Crystal, and designate her as the Virginia Railway Express Operations Board appointee from Arlington. And Ms. Garvey, and appoint her as the alternate to the commission, but also as the alternate to the Virginia Railway Express Operations Board from Arlington. Further, I'll move that we appoint to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for a term also expiring December 31st, 2021, Ms. Crystal. Those are our regional appointments. And colleagues, I will go ahead and move. I do not believe those appointments. I do not believe we need a second. So I'll call for a vote unless there's discussion. Okay, we'll go ahead and ask for a vote. We'll start with Mr. Karantonis.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dorsey?
Aye.
Ms. Garvey?
Aye.
And Ms. Crystal?
Aye.
And I thank you, and I vote aye as well. Mr. DeFerranti votes aye, so those appointments are made by a vote of 5-0. Next, we will go to our advisory group chairs and appointments. I also have a rather lengthy list, so bear with me. We have, to the Aquatics Committee, designate Jennifer Connor as chair through November 30th, 2022. Designate Christy Sawyer as vice chair through November 30th, 2022. To the Audit Committee, appoint and designate Christian Dorsey as co-chair. Appoint and designate Takis Karantonis as co-chair. To the Building Code Board of Appeals, designate Clifton Groover as chairman. To the Citizens Advisory Commission on Housing, designate Eric Berkey as chair. To the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission, designate Joan McIntyre as chair and designate Timothy Effio as vice chair. To the Disability Advisory Commission, designate Rosemary Ciotti as chair. No, excuse me, designate Rosemary Ciotti. To the Economic Development Commission, designate Avril Sisk as chair. To the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission, designate Steve Baker as chair. To the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission, designate Phil Klingelhofer as chair. To the Human Rights Commission, designate Roland Watkins as acting chair through February 23rd, 2021. To the Industrial Development Authority, designate Edwin Fountain as chair. To the Information Technology Advisory Commission, designate Mary Cranwell as chair. To the Joint Facilities Advisory Commission, designate Kathleen McSweeney as chair through December 31st, 2022. Designate Stacy Snyder as vice chair through December 31st, 2022. I have just a few more. To the Parks and Recreation Commission, designate Bill Ross as chair and Shruti Koopa as vice chair. To the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Family, designate Dr. Michael Griffin as chair. To the Planning Commission, designate Jim Lantelmi as chair and designate Daniel Weir as vice chair. To the Tenant Landlord Commission, designate David Tim as chair. To the Commission on the Status of Women, designate Marguerite Luter as acting chair through February 23rd, 2021. And to the Advisory Board on Trespass Vehicle Towing, designate Fred Scheller as chair. Colleagues, that's the motion. Is there any discussion or clarifications? Great, so it's been moved. There is no second required. So I'll ask for a vote on the motion. Just one final note, unless I specifically designated otherwise, the positions run through the end of 2021, December 31st of 2021. There are exceptions, which I mentioned earlier as I read the motion. So the question is on the motion. Mr. Dorsey.
Aye.
Mr. Carantonis.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Garvey.
Aye.
And Mr. DeFranti, as the motion maker, I vote aye as well. The motion carries 5-0, and we are on to we're prepared to move to our remarks, our New Year's remarks. But before we do so, I just want to acknowledge it is nice to be out of 2021. So in that sense, it's a happy new year as we're seeking a better place for this year. But we continue to be fighting this virus, as discussed earlier in the meeting several times. So I'd like to ask the manager to just briefly update us on this next stage, if there are any key high-level updates with respect to COVID-19. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to call you that. Also, Happy New Year to all the other board members, our new vice chair and our outgoing chair. Very briefly, the County Public Health Division has received 1,000 doses of the Moderna vaccine. They received those right before Christmas. The Moderna vaccine is the one that can be refrigerated in a sort of standard freezer. We have a very cold freezer for the Pfizer vaccine on order that probably won't be here until the end of the month. Along with the vaccination efforts that are taking place at the Virginia Hospital Center and then also at our long-term care facilities, you can all go on the Virginia Department of Health website. It tracks the daily totals on vaccines. As of today, there have been 1,708 vaccines done in Arlington. We are in phase 1A of the vaccination process, which covers healthcare workers, emergency responders, and on our website, there's a link to the VDH website that goes into great detail as to who's included in phase 1A. If you have questions, and I know a number of people do have questions, we have our COVID hotline, 703-228-7999. And I strongly urge everybody who has a question about, whether they're eligible, where they fall in the priority order, to call that. And I'd like to emphasize again something we said a few weeks ago, which is a lot is still unknown. And to try to clarify that, next Tuesday on January 12th, we will have a work session with the county board where we will go into a lot more detail and have a lot more information. And with that, back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. You have been working so diligently. I know they're the daily meetings with our emergency response team. And I want to just add to the reassurance that we are thinking and working on this next stage just as diligently as we did on testing and have on contact tracing as well. So if there are any questions, we are going to have that work session a week from tomorrow on the 12th. And in the meantime, we will certainly be following up. That number is 703-228-7999. Colleagues, any questions?
Just thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey, and thank you again to Mr. Schwartz. We are, as board members, we are regularly tracking and focused on this, as we've indicated earlier in the discussion, and we will look forward to the January 12th meeting. So with that, we will move to remarks from each of us. And as chair, I will start. And I want to start with just a reiteration of thanks to each colleague, and also with a few thoughts about 2021 and 2020. Take that, 2020. That's what my sister, who's a doctor, said when she received her first dose of the COVID vaccine a week ago. In her words, I hear determination. The determination I saw last year in Arlington as we came together to face this pandemic. Determination to define 2020 by how we respond to COVID, not just how it impacts us. In Take That 2020, I also hear the challenges we'll have to tackle this year. I propose to focus on 3 themes: stabilization, recovery, and building a county and community that is systematically committed to racial and economic equity. First, stabilization. Just over 10 months ago, most of us had never heard the phrase social distance, hosted a Zoom, or worn a mask. Our lives have been completely upended. Last year, in our first meeting of 2020, the board was celebrating a decline in our office vacancy rate, and our budget prospects looked better than they had in years. We looked forward to a year of prosperity. Tonight, 1 year later, we are worried about our health, hunger, preventing evictions, and helping our children who have been distance learning and isolated from their friends for months and months. We can be proud of the work we did in 2020, as Ms. Garvey mentioned earlier. Our public health department and all of our employees, as well as our community, responded quickly, and we stayed home to flatten the curve so that our hospital and our healthcare system were not overwhelmed. 3 other parts of our response last year stand out to me. First, the county helped more than 3,000 households avoid eviction by providing $7.2 million in rental support and more than $300,000 to help pay utility bills. The county also worked with Arlington Public Schools, the Arlington Food Assistance Center, our PTAs, the Cooperative for Hunger-Free Arlington, and countless other organizations and individual Arlingtonians who stepped up to help those facing hunger and food insecurity. We also helped our businesses, working with our Industrial Development Authority in 3 business improvement districts, to provide grants of up to $10,000 to 394 Arlington businesses to help pay their employees, providing $2.8 million in funding. We can be also proud and deeply grateful for those on the front lines responding to the pandemic. From the bottom of my heart, and I know my colleagues, I want to add my thank you to all Arlington County employees for the work you did in 2020. As we turn the page to 2021, our healthcare response to COVID is clearly the biggest issue we face as a community. Our infection test positivity rate was 9.9% today, well above the 5% threshold the CDC uses to assess the risk of a surge. We face daily case and hospital counts as close to the highest that we've seen. We must get the vaccines out quickly to our healthcare workers, nursing home residents, essential workers, seniors, teachers, and eventually our community as a whole. And we cannot take our eyes off contact tracing, testing, and providing adequate healthcare directly for those in need where we need to. To stabilize our community, we must focus on health, but we must also prioritize hunger response and eviction prevention. When COVID began, 15,800 Arlington residents were unsure of where they would get their next meal in a given week. Those estimates are from our Department of Human Services. That's about 6.8% of our families and our neighbors. Today, the Capital Area Food Bank's estimate and AFAC's estimate as well is that we've seen a significant increase. Up to 26,000 Arlingtonians are at risk of hunger. That's a real challenge. Our fellow Arlingtonians in need, they're our neighbors and our families. Despite our efforts, gaps remain in our ability to serve those at risk of hunger. So to sustain the efforts of all our volunteers and partners and to build a stronger hunger response system, my chair's priority for the coming year will be addressing hunger and food insecurity. County Manager Mark Schwartz and Superintendent Dr. Francisco Duran, with the support of the County Board and the School Board, will be forming a hunger and food insecurity working group over the coming month to help us better address the gaps in our hunger response, racial inequities on hunger, and to better collaborate and coordinate so that we can maximize our resources to fight hunger. The working group We'll work with the newly hired food coordinator that we have just hired over the next 12 to 18 months. Thank you to colleagues for your support on this, and to you, Ms. Garvey, for your continued work through the COG Food Security Committee. Details on how Arlington residents can get involved will be announced over the coming month when we work towards announcing the working group. Helping those at risk of hunger goes hand in hand with those at risk of eviction, which was a shared priority of all of us on the board and staff, the county as a whole, in 2020. Each of us heard from many Arlingtonians worried about whether they could afford to pay rent last year. Our Department of Human Services, nonprofits, and so many partners have worked relentlessly to help thousands of Arlingtonians make it through 2020 without losing their homes. Over the next 6 months, helping those most in need of shelter must continue to be at the heart of how we measure ourselves as a community. Thank you, Mr. Karantonis, for stepping forward to work on part of these issues with our Tenant Landlord Commission, and to all colleagues for their support on this priority. My second theme after stabilization, the big first part, stabilization, the second part, and it will overlap, is recovery. Saying take that to 2020 is also about recovering and building back better and more equitably. Because as difficult as this winter is and will be, spring will come. More and more of us will be vaccinated, and a new Biden administration will lead our nation's recovery. Arlington's recovery will require full economic partnership between the county government and our businesses to navigate a drastically altered landscape. 38% of our businesses indicated in a survey we did ending in October that they're at risk of closing over the next 6 months. Now more than ever, we must support our hard-hit businesses and address office and retail vacancies. So as we work to recover economically, I want to issue a call to action from my heart to yours. Shop local in Arlington this year. Yes, there will be things you need delivered and you want delivered, but we want all our businesses to recover. But let's not forget the livelihoods at stake. Let's keep ordering from our restaurants and local businesses because you love your corner restaurant in Shirlington or the dry cleaner off Williamsburg or any Arlington business that needs your support. In addition to that call to action, we all know public schools are at the heart of our recovery. Our children will need to resume in-person learning and return to routines. The county will be supporting and partnering with Arlington Public Schools to address the pandemic's educational consequences and to help open safely. Specifically, we will support our school board and superintendent as they move through the phases in the return to school plan and provide additional educational resources as able to close opportunity gaps. My commitment to that goal comes from my own experience as a teacher. I will work to find the resources our schools need to help our students harmed by the pandemic. Part of that work is addressing digital equity and broadband access. And on this, thanks to you, Mr. Dorsey, for your early and committed leadership and continuing leadership, I should say. In 2021, the county took numerous steps. Mr. Schwartz was a key part of it, as was our staff as a whole. We invested $500,000 to help serve the many, up to 8,000 APS students who live in low to moderate income households. In 2021, we will work to accelerate our efforts to make broadband affordable and accessible for all Arlington residents. Along with our economy and our schools, I also believe missing middle housing must be part of the recovery we need. I want to be really clear about what I mean when I say missing middle housing. Missing middle is a type of housing: duplexes, townhomes, low-rise garden-style apartments, and modest mid-rise apartments near our population corridors that can help make the costs of home ownership in Arlington more affordable, so that the many people who live here and want to stay but currently can't afford a home have a chance to buy. Missing middle is necessary because the status quo on housing is not sustainable. Arlington continues to be a very desirable place to live. The cost of buying a home has increased over the last 10 to 15 years relative to wages because demand has been far greater than supply. That means that without changes in our housing supply, the 60% of Arlington residents who are renters cannot realistically save up to buy a place. We risk becoming as unaffordable as San Francisco over time if we do not plan for replacement of existing moderately priced housing and grow in a thoughtful, managed way. Missing middle housing is also inextricably linked for me to the inclusive, equitable recovery we need. The median income for white households in Arlington is $134,000 a year, more than double that of black households, which is $58,000 a year. Think about that, more than double. That's not right, and I would argue it's not happenstance. Arlington's decision to prohibit row houses for more than 25 years, I believe, contributes to that inequity. We must adopt policies and plan for a different, more equitable future. I am grateful for each of your support on Missing Middle, and to you, Ms. Crystal, for stepping forward as a liaison to lead on this. My third, last theme is systemic equity for 2021. I hear in the phrase, "Take that 2020, a challenge to us all to recognize and reckon with our failures with respect to racial and economic equity. In 2020, millions of us, millions of Americans, including many in Arlington, took to the streets to demand that we do better. We must and we will. In 2020, we adopted body-worn cameras for our police, sheriffs, and select fire personnel. We established our police practices group and expect to have their recommendations early this year. We appointed a chief race and equity officer who is committed to creating a county where everyone sees themselves in the work we do. We adopted a framework for implementing restorative justice and launched dialogues on racial equity. We set in motion processes for renaming Lee Highway, changing our logo, and renaming streets, buildings, and public spaces, whose names just don't align with our community's commitment to racial equity. In 2021, our challenge will be to see these initiatives through with determination to rise to a new status quo, a status quo that creates systemic equity on the work we started in 2020 and the other priorities I've identified: health, hunger, eviction prevention, economic recovery, our schools, and missing middle. As we work toward that systemic equity, my priorities for the fiscal year 2020 budget will be providing essential services to those most in need, maintaining core services for resident health and safety, and laying the foundation for our economic recovery. I will work my heart out to avoid laying off staff. I will also want to be honest with you, though, that we are in a very tight budget this year, and even tighter fiscal year 2022 with a $56 million projected deficit. In light of that shortfall, we have to focus on what we must do and those most in need. On our environment, we've made progress over the past 2 years. It's one of the reasons I ran for the board, and I continue to support 100% renewable electricity by 2035 and look forward to the implementation framework for our community energy plan. I also support the plastic bag fee and our recycling goals. I want to close where I began with the phrase, "Take that 2020," and a picture of where I think we are at the start of 2021. The COVID vaccines are the light at the end of a very long tunnel. You might have seen that sort of tunnel on the Blue Ridge Parkway or on a train or perhaps in a movie. We don't know how long it will be until we reach the light. 6 months, 8 months, perhaps shorter or perhaps longer. But we do know now that we will get there. If we keep distributing vaccines, social distancing, washing our hands, and wearing masks, we will get as many Arlingtonians as possible to that post-COVID light. I'm asking all of us to work together to meet those challenges we face with commitment, purpose, and kindness as we stabilize, recover, and build systemic racial and economic equity. Thank you. Colleagues, thank you for bearing with me, and I will share who would like to go next. I believe it is it's a little different when we're not in the audience together and we can actually hear each other clap, but I appreciate your patience as I offer those thoughts, and I will pass along who would like to go next with our priorities. Ms. Crystal?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for those excellent comments to get us started. I have some of an echo. I wonder if we should pause for you when we're not talking. All right, much better. Thank you. I am mindful as well, by way of explanation of my voice, with which everyone will be saddled of listening for what I hope will be a brief next few minutes. I just wanted to take a moment and thank the many of you in Arlington who've reached out to share good wishes following my medical leave and surgery of last month, and a big thank you to my colleagues for carrying on without missing a beat as I had to take the December meetings away. I'm so pleased to share that I'm feeling incredibly well. My voice is unfortunately the lagging indicator, but I'm looking forward to being back at full strength and sounding a little less husky by the time we convene again in February, if not January. So thank you again for those who shared good wishes. It meant a great deal to me. So a year ago, when we met on January 2nd of 2020, I was inspired by local and global movements for action on the climate emergency, and I gave comments about bringing the energy and clarity of focus that an emergency begets to our daily work in 2020. I literally titled those remarks "Emergency" and "Urgency." I am not usually a superstitious person, but just in case, I wrote this year's remarks on the topics of relative ease and uneventfulness. Joking aside, there is unfortunately no doubt that 2021 will likely be characterized by the same state of emergency forced by the global pandemic and the economic crisis that characterized the past year. Even with the vaccine rolling out now, we are still seeing the most severe peaks in COVID-19 cases to date. And so to support this community in continuing the sacrifices necessary to stop the spread, we, this board, county government, will have to sustain the resources that keep people in their homes, that keep their families fed, that get testing to the uninsured and the underinsured in our community, that lend a hand to small businesses through permitting flexibilities, technical assistance, that build on prior state and local grant programs. That will be the key work of these early months of 2021, especially. These darkest before the dawn moments in the pandemic's course also mean more incredibly tough conversations ahead in 2021, such as when APS students will return to in-person environments and how to shore up WMATA so that the temporary impacts of ridership collapse don't become a permanent transit downward spiral. The lifeblood of federal aid, which the new congressional agreement should infuse into both schools and Metro, it helps, but it won't spare this community the weighing of competing values to make seemingly impossible decisions. And although the county board may not be the decider on each of these issues, we have a role. We provide critical information. We work to keep our regional coalition strong and aligned. And we must tackle the pandemic within our borders and our region, because all of these decisions, they will get easier when the case counts become lower and fall. The other thing that we need to end the pandemic is trust in the vaccine. But ours is the nation of the Tuskegee study and the public charge rule, our past of medical exclusion or worse on the basis of race and citizenship is not even passed. Vaccination hesitation can be a rational response to these real circumstances. It requires an all-out effort and trusted community leaders to address it with candor and listening, which is why I'm so grateful that our Complete Count Committee, an extraordinarily diverse group of Arlingtonians that pulled off the heroic task of a complete 2020 census, is mobilizing anew, to help reach our hardest to reach neighbors. They will be led by Arlingtonians Wanda Pierce and Elisa Ortiz, joined now in leadership by Nancy White of the Arlington Free Clinic. I am so excited to work with this group of Arlington leaders, along with School Board Vice Chair Barbara Cannonen. Our newly rebranded Complete Vaccine Committee will have a trust-building effort as big as it is important. At some point in 2021, I believe this emergency will begin to lift. And rebuilding after this once-in-a-century pandemic is an opportunity unique so far in my lifetime to think afresh about what kind of future we want for ourselves and for our children, including here in Arlington County. For example, the Missing Middle Housing Study is finally and officially underway in phase 1, establishing common definitions about the problems with Arlington's current housing stock and trends. We still have miles to travel with the specifics of the study, but already residents are engaging in a healthy dialogue, whether it's new Neighbors for More Neighbors groups springing up, a fresh willingness to look at how policies, lending practices, restrictive covenants all shape the lack of diversity that characterizes too many of our neighborhoods today, or just thoughtful questions about trade-offs like lot sizes versus transit access or off-street parking versus tree preservation. I'm so inspired to see it. This is a conversation about how the future of Arlington should look and who the future of Arlington is for. And so it's a conversation for us to have with each other as neighbors, not just for county government alone to lead. And that climate emergency that inspired my remarks this time last year, I think there's actually reason to feel hopeful for action in these early months of 2021. Certainly the incoming presidential administration's prioritization of the issue, but here in Arlington, we'll complete the update of the Community Energy Plan Implementation Framework, which means adding specifics to our big, bold goals for renewable energy and carbon emissions reduction, creating more detailed plans for decarbonizing our government activities. I am looking forward to some spirited discussions about our transition to electric vehicles in the county fleet, about helping community members access renewables in their personal residential use, and other critical topics. 2021 is also the year of our Natural Resources Master Plan update. It's a time for gathering inventories and planning for the future of our trees, our forests, streams, and public lands. And importantly, both plans for clean energy and for stewardship of our natural resources, these are potential proof points for us to embed and set higher goals for environmental equity. We know that nationally, Black and Latino communities have higher exposure to air pollution and to environmental toxins. They bear greater risks for climate-induced heat waves and flooding. And according to a new analysis from the Center for American Progress just this past year, non-white Americans are 3 times more likely to live in what they describe as a nature-deprived area than white Americans. We talked so much during 2020 about racial justice and about how there actually are no race-neutral policies. So in 2021, we should be pushing ourselves in environmental policy as well as in housing, energy policy, and so many other areas to see what we can do to actively undo these racial disparities that do persist here in Arlington too. In short, we may not have seen the emergency coming in 2020, or at least not at the scale and severity it has visited upon us. But in 2021, our challenge will be to see past it, through it, and beyond it, to the type of community we want to be on the other side of this life-changing emergency. If anyone's up to it, I know that it's Arlington County. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. And I know we all have said it at different times. Welcome back. We're thrilled that you're back with us, healthy, and thank you for your remarks. Happy New Year, we hope, for all of us. Mr. Dorsey.
Well, thank you, Mr. DeFerranti, and please accept my congratulations to you as part of our new leadership team. So thanks to you and to Vice Chair Crystal. And we appreciate so much your taking the mantle and leading this board for the 2021 year. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Garvey, our outgoing chair, for so steadily leading us through the experience that was 2020. Now, it was an experience that challenged us in so many ways, yet was met by a level of excellence from our staff in navigating challenging circumstances. The list of individuals meriting recognition is extensive, and it includes our county manager. So, Mr. Schwartz, please accept my gratitude to you and to our staff for your outstanding work over this past year. 2020 dealt an unanticipated and devastating blow to us all, and I so appreciate the many members of our community who adapted to our changing circumstances, showed resilience in the face of ongoing crisis, and demonstrated grace and goodwill in working to keep themselves and others healthy and secure. Now, the traditional tenor of these first of the year remarks, where we look out over the horizon of the entire year, is difficult for me, given 2020, when our vision narrowed from week to week and sometimes even day to day. For the foreseeable future, we will be well served to continue that approach as we manage a pandemic where cases and case rates are too high and where the number of COVID hospitalizations is concerning. The salutary effects of what may end up being several approved vaccines bring along the need to coordinate the safe, equitable, and widespread distribution of them to our entire community. And the public health imperative to continue restrictions to the way we engage in commerce and community will deepen the economic insecurity many are experiencing. And though herd immunity to COVID-19 may mark the end of the devastation, it will also serve as the beginning of our imperative to repair the damage to the security and stability of our residents and our businesses. Now, how we do that is not certain to me at this point, but I draw optimism from the 2020 experience, when community groups and organizations, along with our public schools and local government, came together to provide food to those who would have otherwise gone hungry. When multiple solutions were deployed to extend quality broadband so that our children could participate in the distance learning they were forced to undertake. And where there were innovative programs that were developed to support our service businesses in maintaining their operations amid occupancy restrictions. And where the necessary services and functions of local government were maintained through the kind of innovation and creativity that in some cases yielded better service delivery than ever before. These experiences give me confidence that Arlington has the stuff to tackle whatever we are required to adapt to over this year and to repair the frayed fabric of our society so that we can emerge even stronger. Now, one way we are growing stronger is by walking toward racial justice and equity. Well before our nation reckoned with state and civilian violence against non-combative African Americans, our community began the work of confronting systemic racism by starting the process of building structural equity. We should and we must be held accountable for building upon the work of normalizing the concepts of race and equity and deepening our analyses of those who benefit and those who are burdened by our actions, even when doing so requires grappling with data that offer inconvenient truths, such as that there are those who are subject to complaints to authorities that are disproportionately persons of color. Now, I challenge us to confront the practices around complaint-based enforcement. And while we have a natural and commendable desire to be responsive to those who are vocal, our response should not be at the expense of those who are silent. And I believe we must thoughtfully reform systems so that government's power to be punitive is not brought to bear against individuals when the complainants are acting upon animus, implicit bias, or narrow perspectives. Now, I recognize that this is difficult because I believe that our community is healthier when we all take the responsibility to say something when we see something. Yet I also believe that safety and security are false virtues when coming at the expense of one's human or civil rights. So I hope that we can begin a process for our community to better understand what constitutes suspicious and offending behavior and activity, and that our enforcement promotes compliance, and when punitive measures are necessary, that they are scaled to the magnitude of the problem. Let's continue in the year ahead to keep one another safe and to understand our collective agency in tackling the work and meeting the challenges that lie ahead. Best wishes to all for a happy new year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey, for those thoughtful and also time-aware remarks. We appreciate it. Happy New Year to you as well. Next, we will move to Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you and Ms. Crystal to your election. It's exciting to see you at the leadership. I fully agree with Mr. Dorsey. It's a dynamic duo, obviously, and I look forward to working with you to tackle this 2021, which is the year of recovery. Let's call it this way. And thank you again, Ms. Garvey, for your leadership through an exceptionally tough year. As everybody by now really knows, this has been a yeoman's work that you have accomplished, and I really thank you together with, I'm absolutely certain, thousands of Arlingtonians. And Mr. Chair, thank you for leading us to a moment of silence for the 182 Arlingtonians that we lost in this pandemic. I happened to check our dashboard. The last one was this last 24 hours, which should give us a lot of pause. So I'm joining my colleagues in thanking the heroes of 2020, frontline workers, from the healthcare professionals to the first responders, county staff led by Mr. Swartz, and down to the grocery store clerks, all who worked tirelessly, selflessly, and mostly invisibly, so that we as a society enter this new year with the hope that an end is really in sight. I want to especially thank the vast majority of residents who demonstrated unprecedented discipline and civic responsibility in doing the right thing for many, many months every day, staying home, washing hands, wearing masks, and socially distancing. Long before a vaccine was available, it's you, the members of our community, that have been the most effective helpers in containing the virus, reducing its impact, and bringing the pandemic to an end. We stay united as a community, and with your help, we will beat COVID-19. We will return to work, we will safely open schools, we will re-energize our economy, and we will be able to meet without fear once again. So, and at this point, I also want to publicly thank my colleagues, and particularly past Chair Libby Garvey and Chairman DeFerranti, as well as County Manager Mark Swartz, and the County Manager's Office, and Kendra Jacobs, and our County Board Clerk, and her amazing County Board Office team, on a personal matter, on providing me with the invaluable assistance and helping me to hit the ground running after being elected this year. Earlier this year, as Ms. Garvey mentioned, we lost a dear friend, community leader, county board member, Eric Gatchell. In his first full address to this board in January 2019, Eric talked about our dreams as a community and how to overcome our fears together. His presence will always be felt, and his message will help guide us as we address these new challenges. From Eric, I learned that leadership is not only about responding to the immediate needs, but also about focusing on the future and building a strong, systemic system of foundations that will carry and sustain our community beyond any current crisis. So systemic would be a key word for this past year, and a core reason why COVID-19 could have such a negative impact. based on the accumulation of underlying deficiencies and inequalities. Systemic is inequitable access to health, social services, food, housing, unemployment benefits, and economic opportunity, all compounded by racial injustice. Systemic is also being strategic in our response to the climate crisis, in how we protect our natural resources, and how we support our local small business economy. Thus, as we respond to the COVID-19 crisis in 2021, I plan personally to focus on these things. First, on fiscally sound, sustainable, and accountable governance. This is a challenging year, as our chair pointed out in his initial speech, where all our fiscal priorities will have to be carefully re-examined and contrasted against major challenges like the declining commercial tax base, the pressing priority of rescuing Metro, the not less pressing need of continuing supporting APS, and the need to continue to provide effective social safety net services to vulnerable Arlingtonians. It will always be people first. I will continue to work with Electrifying Energy on advancing the county's sustainability goals by working to put in place a strong community energy plan implementation framework. And I should mention also putting in place an equally significant update of our forestry and natural resources master plan. I will actively support our efforts to find new and creative approaches to housing affordability by adding more and more effective tools in our policy toolbox, such as the missing middle housing that offers a pathway to increase housing supply at different price points for all Arlingtonians. I further want to focus on key systemic elements of our critical economic recovery, such as pursuing a new and long-term effective framework of support for the backbone of our economy, of our local economy, which are the small businesses. I am really focused on delivering social as well as economic essential infrastructure, such as affordable broadband access to individuals and businesses. And I'm always focused on a new challenge this year, which will be the mutually beneficial partnership with our public employees as we will engage in collective bargaining for the very first time. At last but never least, I will continue to focus on working with you to digest the lessons of our extensive work on racial equity and transform them into actionable steps forward. From reevaluating our policing practices to making public participation accessible at all levels. These conversations will indeed continue in 2021, and I look forward to the progress we will make together. The face of hope this past year is the joyous expression of the first people who received the COVID-19 vaccine. As we overcome the challenges in 2021 and beyond, we can share this optimistic expression of this accomplishment of science, perseverance, and a commitment to a common cause. So I wish you indeed a safe, healthy, and happy new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. You joined us in July, but it seems as though you are already a veteran with all of the busyness of the last 5 months. Thank you for your comments. Ms. Garvey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So I know I'm finishing up here. We've got CivFed waiting for us, but I do want to congratulate you and Ms. Crystal. And actually, I want to thank you, too, for becoming our chair and vice chair this year. 2021 should hopefully be better than and a little easier than 2020, but it's got to have a lot of challenges. And I know with you both at our helm, you're going to get us through as we work to stabilize and recover from this from the pandemic. And in 2021, I plan to continue to do whatever I can to support our efforts to end systemic racism and to continue to build a more resilient Arlington. Innovation is bumpy and never easy, but I think we've all been pleasantly surprised, actually, at how quickly and well we can innovate when we need to. And I will continue to support smart innovation efforts. I look forward to analyzing what we learned and actually what we find worked better this past pandemic year, and plan to do what I can to ensure that we keep what good changes we've made and progress we've made, really getting through a rather painful year, but we want to get some good things out of it. One of the lessons I've taken away already is how important is kindness. Where we were kind with each other this year and understanding of the stress everyone was under, I think things went better. When we got angry and accusatory towards each other, and I'm talking in a general, larger we, this board really was great the whole time, but things generally went worse. And that brings me to a bit of one of my perennial themes, and one I plan to continue this year, which is civility. I'll repeat myself a little because the basic points really don't change. Civility's got the same root word as civilization, because civilization depends on civility. And books on civility have been around for a long time. The one I mentioned sometimes from 1595 has as its first rule, be respectful, not subservient or always agreeing, but respectful. And I think being respectful today means treating each other like we're all on the same team. We may disagree about something important, but we, and I'm talking again about the large general we here in Arlington, we should respect each other, even as we argue vigorously, because let's face it, resolving different points of view, even after vigorous argument, often leads to better outcomes for everybody. So this past year, I think we've all seen how incivility can take a toll on our democracy. It hurts those in public service, it fractures communities, and that's why I keep bringing it up. When I see incivility here in Arlington, it worries me, because we're going to be facing some major issues in the next year, including, of course, setting budget priorities at a time when our economy is just struggling to recover. And, of course, putting an end to systemic racism. We really cannot afford to fight among ourselves if we're going to deal effectively with these big issues. And finally, the other issue that I've been talking about for years and plan to continue again is how we support local government, especially regarding pay for elected officials. When I began my elected service back in the 90s, it was somewhat reasonable to assume that these jobs were part-time work. But times have changed, and we need to change too. And I would like us all to reflect a moment on what local elected boards and city councils do. In today's electronic age, elected members are expected to be available pretty much 24/7 to their constituents to answer emails. And then we attend meetings and ceremonial events. We're supposed to analyze major land use and development issues. We coordinate with regional bodies, and ultimately we're responsible for large budgets in the range of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And people turn to the elected leaders for leadership in a crisis. And of course, right now, elected officials are expected to do all of this work part-time because they're assumed to have another job. And if you step back and look at it, at what I think our work entails today, it's really totally unreasonable to treat these positions as part-time. But just about every local government in Virginia runs this way. And it's not only Arlington, but that doesn't make it right. And my primary goal here is good government. A strong democracy and government requires a broad and representative pool of candidates to run for office, and it's getting harder and harder to get good people to run. When I encourage good people to run, some of them tell me they can't take the nastiness. There's that civility issue again. But more say they just simply can't afford it. And over time, that's not good. It's not good for democracy. It's not good for our government here. It's not good for government in general. And I think this year has made it really clear how important is good government at the local level. Indeed, I think it's local governments across the nation that have held this country together over the past 4 years. So in 2021, I do look forward to supporting our chair, Mr. DeFranti, and his work on equity, stabilization, and recovery as we build on some of the hard lessons from this year to make Arlington more equitable, more innovative, and more resilient. And I do plan to encourage civil discourse as much as I can and do what I can to help local elected officials get the support they need to do the work we all need them to do. And with that, I am finished with my remarks, and I turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, and we can get over to CivFed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to hear civility, equity. Really appreciate also your leadership. I honestly think it was several years of being a chair in 2020, all in 1 year. So thank you for that. And thank you each for your comments. We wish our community a happy new year. We are a few minutes late for our Civic Federation's annual meeting, but thanks to each of you colleagues, and we will see you in a minute or two at the Civic Federation meeting. Thank you to our community. I'll use my official stapler to gavel us out. Thank you.
Members, would you like to just take point and lead that part and start off maybe with a discussion, or how would you like to proceed?
Sure. So I'll just check briefly, sort of get us oriented. We did received some questions, and we want to work through those questions. I think we talked a little bit about brief introductions, but I for my part, I'm ready to waive that, and we were a few minutes late. So are there colleagues that have concerns? If you could just sort of wave in the chat if there's any introduction you want to do. I'm seeing none, so we'll go straight to questions unless you had any other desires. I trust that each of you will be able to see our full remarks for our priorities for the year. You each know, most everyone here knows us, so we'll dispense the introductions and go right to the questions. And I would propose that we start with Parks and Recreation as an area. And we received a question that I will start on, and then colleagues certainly jump in if there's pieces of it answers to this question that you'd like to focus on. So the question was about the Parks and Rec. I don't think that it was in the resolution, but it could have been referred to. I couldn't see the full piece, but the Parks and Recreation bond funding allocation study. It's a 28-page document, and there is an associated resolution which may have some overlap with Ms. Bading's discussion. But basically, the question is about, have we considered the importance of open space that the Civic Federation has focused on, and in particular, have we considered that study? And the answer to that is yes. Staff has, and we have as a board. I can say for my part, I'm always thinking of the 30 acres over 10 years and 3 acres a year component that is referenced several times in the study. Our staff is as well. The question also had to do with a desire for the balance between recreation space in our parks and open space. We're thinking about open space in Benjamin Banneker. We're thinking about it at the Harris Teeter project, where we really focused on open space. And there's also a desire for flexible use, which has been brought to us recently as well. So we do think about those concerns regularly. Our capital improvement plan, I often think of as like a competition. We have so many different plans. We have the bicycle element, bicycle transportation plans. We have a desire for additional funding for infrastructure, which we need as well. So our capital improvement plans make it difficult as we seek to work all those priorities together under limited funding. That's what leads to goals like the 30 acres and goals like, for example, our affordable housing goals every year, which we haven't met either. But we've actually, I feel, come closer to the 30 acres. I guess I would say it's a competition that each of us as board members is aware of and our staff is aware of. So that's kind of how I'd start to approach that. There's I don't know if colleagues want to add. There's also a question with respect to the Rouse property, but I'll first see if colleagues wanted to add. I can't quite see everybody, so I'll just sort of trust at the moment. So I'll trust that if colleagues wanted to also chime in, you will unmute and jump in. I'll just finish with respect to this part of Parks and Recreation with respect to there's a question about the Roush property and the 2016 needs assessment survey. As soon as we heard rumblings that the Roush property might be, we have been contacted by numerous residents about it. We have been contacted about the property. The owner has indicated that they were not interested initially in our offer and selling to us, and which we reached out to them as soon as we heard about this. And that does not mean we have not continued to follow up, but we have not gotten the response that we would like with respect to the Rouse property as far as looking into it and funding. Funding is a component that we have to consider as we approach what would be, there's some by right development that is available at the Rouse property. So we are aware of this, following up on this, and we also are mindful of the cost involved. So there are others on the board who have perhaps additional thoughts on the Rouse property, but that's after looping back on a weekly basis with our manager. That's what I'd say to this point. Others, colleagues?
Go ahead.
I was going to add another, Mr. Karantonis, I'm probably going to take you away from the point. I just wanted to add a sort of associated point on historic preservation. Because there are a lot of people concerned about not just the green space and that sort of thing, but the historic preservation. And we are in discussion, while the owners have not been very receptive at all to doing anything other than building houses on it. They are receptive, I believe, to our going in and documenting the house and documenting the property to preserve at least the historic record. So for those interested in historic issues, that is going on. So I just thought I would add that. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Mr. Karantonis. Go ahead.
Oh, I just, there was a short question that I saw here popping on the chat. Where is the Rolls property? And it is in Dominion Hills. And that was there is significant press coverage for this, local press coverage for this estate and what it used to be, what it has been in the last decades and what it is today.
Great, thanks, Mr. Karantonis. I know we talked about, Mr. Gadjahar, we talked about, and I appreciate you referencing our illustrious work on the School Budget Commission several years back. We talked about having a chance for a follow-up question in this area. I don't know if if you want to put this to the Civic Federation as a whole, if there's a follow-up question on Parks and Recreation and open space. We do have a number of other categories, but go ahead.
I'm looking in the chat here, and there's one from Mr. Gelman. If they're going to fill the Rouse property with housing, has anyone looked at the traffic impact?
So that's certainly a fair question. There's some challenges that we have with respect to development. There's the concept of by right development, and we certainly can have reasonable limitations there, but strictly precluding the development of housing that is already allowed under zoning there is not something that we would have the easy authority to do under Virginia law, as far as I understand it. I don't know if colleagues, we certainly would love to have additional authority, but the history, as I understand it, of property right development in Virginia as a whole has been challenging. That doesn't mean, as you know, that Mr. Gelman, that we wouldn't want to assert as much as we can in that right, but traffic per se, according to my understanding, would not enable us to preclude the by right development that is there. I don't know if I see a nod from Ms. Crystal. I don't know, other colleagues, if you have thoughts.
I think that's well put, Mr. DeFerenti, and just anticipating that we've got quite a few other questions coming in about denser development in whatever forms it may take. This is an excellent reminder that folks have basic property rights. In the vast majority of the land in Arlington County zoned residential, their by right option is the least amount of housing, or the least amount of density rather, but they have to be allowed some amount of housing. And so in fact, sometimes having this zoning for the least possible amount of density means that we as a community have the least ability to plan for it, require community benefits like contributions to transit, and otherwise weigh in on traffic plans when something is the lowest possible density developed by right.
Yeah. So I suggest that we step forward to the housing set of questions, if that will be okay with you. So housing, we've got a couple of different of our members on tap, and I think, let's see, did you want to start? We talked about affordable housing distribution. Mr. Dorsey, did you want to go start there?
Thank you, Mr. DeFerenti. Yes, I do believe you tapped me to do that. So the question is, building upon what has been a long community conversation and what is described as a broad consensus that committed affordable housing should be more evenly and equitably distributed throughout our county. What steps is the board taking to implement this consensus? In many ways, the board worked with the community to develop this consensus. It is spoken to in our affordable housing master plan, so guiding policy that we seek to have a sufficient and equitable distribution of committed affordable housing. And over the past few years, I think there have been some notable achievements in that regard. Major projects in Roslyn, for example, on transit that are 100% affordable, but even beyond that, providing a lot of incentives and persuasion to get on-site units in areas that hitherto were not made available for committed affordable units, where developers would seek to do their affordable housing requirements and have them effectuated off-site. We're getting more of those coming on-site. Through the work of Housing Arlington, we're looking at a lot of different initiatives to ensure that committed can be made available when otherwise wholesale redevelopment occurs. Think about the Housing Conservation District work, which is looking at a lot of our older market rate affordable communities and providing some opportunities and incentives for those to maintain committed affordable units, again, in areas that are traditionally underrepresented with committed affordable units. There's also a new study which is going to commence in 2021, the multi-family reinvestment study. I just cite all of these things to say that this is very much a guiding priority of the county. As everyone knows who follows this issue, we're dealing with the countervailing effects of market forces, which have the price of the cost of land being in areas where there tend to be a higher concentration of affordable units. And we also have development activity, which is along our transit corridors, of which Columbia Pike is one. However, we are taking intentional steps to ensure that affordable homes and the families that occupy those affordable homes are able to live throughout our county, and that we don't just simply concentrate them to specific areas. So I would sum it up to say that the consensus is felt by the county, it's reflected in our plans, and it's being manifest in the results.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorsey. I guess what I'll suggest is that we go through a couple of these housing questions and then come back, if that's without objection. I see there's a question on, oh, go ahead.
Maybe, Mr. Chair, well, I would like to add to Mr. Dorsey's excellent description of what the intention and the goals of the policy goals of Arlington County is that preservation of market rate affordable units is critical for a successful distribution of affordable housing. We don't want to talk only about committed affordable housing, which is difficult to produce, difficult to locate, difficult to make happen in an efficient and fiscally responsible way. But we have also to preserve, we want to preserve market rate affordable units as good as we can, everywhere we can. And they are already well distributed in Arlington County. The Civic Federation provided a question on housing conservation districts, and Mr. Dorsey already referenced the study we do in multifamily preservation. And this is really an effort that will be very focused in studying how best we can keep multifamily units that already exist around, so that they add to our market for this. I should also add that since I remember, policymakers here in Arlington County, we always wanted to attract diverse income levels in all districts in Arlington. It's not only that we want to distribute affordable housing, we want to also bring higher, medium, and higher income households in places where they weren't before. And this continues to be a goal. So in the western end of Columbia Pike, the goal was always to preserve what was there, no net new, preserve what was there, the families of 60% AMI, for example, that we had there, but create an environment and policy environment where new families, new households who make a little bit more than that, who are more closer to the medium middle class, would find it attractive to move in and balance socially, culturally, and resource-wise the area.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Your experience before coming to the board is evident in so much of what you covered, as well as, frankly, Mr. Dorsey, your thoughts too. I think I want to just switch a little bit as far as order and see if we can go. There was a question regarding missing middle that Ms. Crystal, you were teed up to talk about. So why don't you go ahead?
Thank you so much. And I'll paraphrase the question, although I see Eric Cassell doing yeoman's work, pasting the questions in full in the chat. Eric, thank you for that work. I'll briefly say, as this is my first question to answer, a big thank you to the Civic Federation and certainly to your chair, Ellen Gadjahar, for welcoming us and facilitating a great conversation. So I will try to be brief, but this is hard because this is a topic about which I am impassioned. And the question was a great one. It was essentially, if missing middle is not going to deliver a housing that's affordable, right? We're talking about affordable housing, then why do it? So without getting too far down the rabbit hole of the premise, we've talked a little bit about affordable housing, and a lot of times we use that as shorthand for folks making maybe 30%, 40%, up to 60% of area median income. And so if simply allowing more zoning flexibilities is not going to deliver housing that's affordable for purchase to somebody making, say, 50% of the area median income, what's the point? It's a great question. I'm going to give you two high-level answers. The first starts with a pretty remarkable statistic, and I'm stealing this from the National Building Museum that had a great exhibit on the need for these different types of housing a couple of years ago. 20% of American households live in nuclear families right now. 20%. That means 4 out of 5 of us are living in some kind of household that looks different than mom, dad, 2.5 kids, Spot the dog and Felix the cat. People are living with roommates. They're living in non-traditional family situations. They're living independently. And our housing supply in Arlington, as nationally, has not kept up. What we are seeing, and I know what you're seeing in your neighborhoods because I'm seeing it in mine, outside of our densest corridors, we are seeing a lot of really large homes for single families. And that's not an accident. It's because, broadly speaking, 79% of the land in Arlington that is zoned residential, by right, it's illegal to build anything else other than that one home on one lot. And so, of course, with land being as valuable as it is in Arlington, we're seeing folks maximize what that one house that that they're allowed to build can look like. And that doesn't match what our families need. So if you are an empty nester that's ever looked at your spouse and said, I'd really love to stay in our neighborhood, but there's nowhere for us to go if we downsize, then that's an example of why we need missing middle housing. If you're ever someone who thought, like a dear friend of mine recently decided, I'd really love the opportunity to invest in a row house with my sister and help raise her kid together, then there's nothing for you. There's relatively little for you in Arlington County. And you've moved, as my friend did, to Baltimore to find it. You know, I look out every day at the project I live in. I live in a townhouse. We're surrounded by a row of townhouses, a few single family houses with one shared common yard anchored by a majestic old 6-story oak tree, right? And if you can't find that in your neighborhood, it's because it's actually illegal to build it by right in 79% of Arlington County. And so there are all types of housing that are desired by all types of families, and most of it is not legal to build in, again, roughly speaking, 79% of Arlington County. Diverse housing stock allows for a diversity of neighbors, and that's why this is worth doing. But I'll also add one more point without getting too far into the weeds of percent area median income and affordability. I will note that it's important to think about housing affordability more broadly. And if we can legalize forms of housing that could be delivered by right that might be affordable to folks making even 100% of area median income, that does two things. One, it provides housing stock that right now the market is not delivering, because a lot of that new product is much closer to affordable to people making 150% or more of area median income. But it also gives our middle income subsidy programs a fighting shot to work. And those of you who study well or know well about our rental programs know this kind of dance. In order for our housing grants programs to work, we need committed affordable units, because you can't just give somebody making 40% of area median income a housing grant for, even $1,000 a month and say, off you go into the market. Good luck finding a $5,000 a month 3-bedroom apartment, right? It doesn't work. You need both the stock that's more moderate income that we achieve through the committed affordable units, paired with the housing grant to help folks meet that gap between their income and what's available. And so similarly, we actually have programs. Folks are often surprised to learn. We have a moderate income purchase assistance program. We have live where you work grants. But if you are a moderate income second-year teacher, third-year firefighter, GS-11 Fed, maybe, those moderate income programs don't get you anywhere in a lot of our market, and certainly in a lot of our different neighborhoods, because the purchase price is just too high. And so that's where the difference of an $800,000 half of a duplex really sounds catastrophically high, especially, if you bought your home 30, 40 years ago, but it makes a huge difference between that and that $1.5 million new construction. And the difference it makes, among others, is that it gives those purchasing assistance programs a chance to work and a chance to help more moderate income folks fill that delta with our programs. So those are just a couple of sort of reasons to pursue missing middle housing. In short, because more diverse housing stock helps meet the needs of more diverse neighbors. And again, to give those moderate income purchasing assistance programs, live where you work programs, a fighting chance to help moderate income earners buy in Arlington County.
You're muted, Matt.
It happens. Thank you, Alan. It happens once each board meeting. And so clearly, Ms. Crystal, you got a ton of passion about that. I know that will prompt follow-up questions. I would just like to see if Ms. Garvey, there are a couple of questions around housing, and wanted to see if you wanted to add your thoughts. One was on the costs and benefits. I think also another is commercial building conversion. So on housing, if you wanted to kind of paraphrase and add your thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit. I mean, the cost and the benefit, that gets back to this actually a very specific issue people talking about, this Tischler Bias or B's, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, method for looking at fiscal impact analysis. And, some of our neighboring jurisdictions use it. We have been looking at it. I just got an update. We're actually in the process right now of scoping a contract to have that kind of an analysis done. So for those who have been, wondering why we're not doing it and thinking we should do it, we're moving forward to doing it. And that should be ready. I don't have soon. They asked for a date. I can't give you a date specific, but soon. And I think once we get the scope done and the contract let, then we'll be announcing that. So we'll let people know. And then I realized I did not look the converting from commercial to residential. We have done some of that. We're continuing to look at that. And I expect a lot will come out. Sort of that's going to be a little bit the fallout from 2020, right? Is looking at how we can do that. So I expect to see some more projects like that coming forward, and new looks at things. So that's definitely on our radar scope.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. And so I wondered if there were follow-up questions that.
There is one. There's one from Mr. Hosea Stevenson in Clarendon Courthouse. Has the county looked at a development bonus that would be feasible for getting one or more CAFs on typical residential lots north of 29? For example, would a private owner find it worth building a approximately 10-unit apartment building on a typical single-family lot in Donaldson Run if they had to provide one CAF in it?
Matt, I'm happy to start with this one. Yeah, this is a great question, and it's something we've looked at a lot. And I can say on a personal note, I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, that has something very similar to this, and through inclusionary zoning. As I know, Josiah knows, because he knows the Virginia context even better than I do, right? We're not able to require that, and so hence his question about, is there an incentive? I will say this, I think what we've tried to kind of scope out with the missing middle is a lot of what could we expect the markets to do if projects were allowed by right. The question of how might we achieve required density, or excuse me, how might we allow for enough density to realize required on-site affordable, has been within the scope of the Housing Conservation District's work, which has included a couple of areas around, for example, Lee Highway. So that's sort of how do we get, really, especially north of the route of the RB corridor, that has been a piece of it as well. So a roundabout way of saying, that's sort of not quite at the core of the missing middle scope, but I think it's within what we're talking about here. And what I would say, what we're talking about here are these trade-offs. Are we comfortable with mid-rise apartment buildings in areas that have historically been very low density if it means achieving affordability? I think I've heard from some Arlingtonians that there is interest. I've heard from others that there is less so, right? Because there's real concern about density and what that might mean for other impacts. So I do think this question, although not at the heart of what's been scoped out for missing middle, maybe a little more akin to what we discussed in housing conservation districts, is nevertheless very much part of that conversation. And so I suspect, Josiah, and I know others are involved as community partners or otherwise signed up for that missing middle study group, but would urge that you do subscribe to updates as a way of sort of raising your own voice if you feel strongly about it one way or another, or really want to emphasize that there's some desire to get those land use tools like that development bonus in the conversation as well.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. I know, I thought it was so in your wheelhouse that I let you go first, but I also think that Mr. Karantonis and Mr. Others may have thoughts on this. Go ahead.
Ms. Crystal has covered that excellently. The only addition I would want to make, actually two. One is tackling housing affordability is also an economic, sustainability issue. Each and every one of the typical households that Ms. Crystal has described, that would be, our target group for missing middle housing, are essential for our economic welfare right now in Arlington. And right now we're facing a situation where all these people, all these households, very productive households, have to actually leave Arlington County and, in the old fashion style to drive until they qualify, with extreme costs for themselves, for our society as a whole, for the taxpayer at the end. So actually having tackling the issue of a sound balance, of not supply starve our market, not continue to starve our market from supply, is a critical economic development strategy. On the other side, part of the study that I at least expect that part of the study of the missing middle study will be also to see what developers of that type of buildings, of that type of structures, of that size, of the moderate size scale buildings will come forward, and what are their economic model of delivering housing of this type. And this is when the discussion about how we incentivize some additional affordability, how we fit the economics of housing, moderate and even lower income households in the whole mix will reveal. I fully agree with Ms. Crystal that this is exactly what we are doing. We are trying to study that and to find out how it fits in the economics and, of course, in the neighborhood dynamics of any given place.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. I mean, for my part, I'll just say that, duplexes, townhomes, and I focused in my remarks just now on mid-rise, a little closer to population corridors. So what you've heard from Mr. Karantonis, each of us, is evidence that we are still thinking through the ideas. This is not set, but the broad concept that we need to be a place that makes it more possible for market rate solutions to work, so that more moderate income GS11 teachers, firefighters can afford to buy is a shared set of ideas that lead us to want to move forward in the missing middle housing types. So don't see hands. I
have a question on that, Mr. Ferranti. This is something that I've come across myself. Has there ever been any discussion for alternative ownership models, as an example, community land trusts in Arlington as an option?
Yes, I think I have to plead. I actually did a fair bit of reading, and several of us have looked into that. It is not something that has moved forward. That the reading that I have done is not something. It is something we've looked at, but it's not something we've been able to do. There is some challenges when the land is already, in my view, when the land is already very costly. But I see Ms. Crystal and wants to chime in, and others as well. Go ahead, Katie.
I'll try to be brief, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to a couple of housing experts about this a year or so ago. And I think the consensus is that allowing additional zoning or additional units to be built is going to be a necessary but not sufficient requirement. And I'll say just another word about what I mean for that. Right now, community land trusts work best when land is relatively affordable to acquire. That is not Arlington. And so right now, for a land trust to be acquiring a parcel that may cost $500,000 or $600,000 just to acquire and put one home on it, it's not going to pencil out. It's why a community land trust model hasn't really taken off here. It's why, frankly, we don't see more Habitat for Humanity here in Arlington either. What I've heard from Habitat, from experts in the community land trust model is, if we can build a fourplex on that piece of land, then all of a sudden it makes sense for our nonprofit, for our investors, for our model to try to invest in that land and keep it within community ownership. So I think, again, that sort of legalization of alternatives rather than just one house per one lot is going to be something that we have to at least start with before we can really start to explore land trust, Habitat for Humanity, other models. Otherwise, the cost of building that one house is just going to be prohibitive because of the cost of land in Arlington.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. I've looked at it. I think there was either Durham or Baltimore. There have been some other communities where land trusts have worked. worked. So I don't know if there are other pieces to add. I know, Mr. Karantonis, you know this area well. I guess I would, any thoughts or wanting?
Crystal is absolutely correct. There has to be a return on the investment of the land trust. The land trust has to raise the money to buy that piece of land, and it has to be able to put enough value added on this land in order to make it work. Now, the good news is that land in Arlington, it is scarce, it's not available, but it has a steady appreciation. So this is an incentive on the one side. And if we can find places where we can loosen up the zoning restrictions, then as Ms. Crystal mentioned, we have a chance to, get offers and get engagement from developers that would invest this way in a community land trust. And there's still opportunities around, so that's
So
there's scarcer by the week almost.
Well, I've been trying to think of it in terms of could that apply to a condo apartment building? I think it could, but there's more to do and to think about there. I see a question that we will get to in the chat from Kit and also Jesse. I guess what I'd suggest is so that we cover some of the other areas, and frankly, because I actually am interested in sort of an update on this. This is an area I've worked on. I actually was interested in legislation. There's a couple of different subjects, and I wondered if Mr. Dorsey, maybe you could speak to the question on broadband, if you're set, because I have followed, but I also benefit from your wisdom, frankly.
Sure, thank you, Mr. DeFerranti. So there was a question that I'm sure Eric will put up in the chat soon, but it's how is Arlington doing with reaching students with broadband? And is there full coverage? If not, what's the timetable? And our costs for descriptions being defrayed for students where needed. So I'll try to attack that efficiently. One, the issues of providing broadband, fortunately for us, even though we didn't anticipate that it would be such a need this particular year, we foresaw this over the course of the past several years, and as part of our digital equity initiatives, have been looking at how to make sure we provide quality broadband for households that do not have access at all or do not have access to quality enough broadband to meet the needs of what we were thinking then was the modern information economy, but certainly very applicable to the distance learning needs of schools. So multiple solutions were able to be deployed pretty quickly once the pandemic hit and students were forced into distance learning. One, we provided funding so that there could be wired connections where possible, where we could actually get the ISPs to deliver hardwired broadband to homes with students. That certainly did not account for all of the needs, so that there were a variety of other solutions later on top of that. Personal Wi-Fi hotspots, the initial tranche of those were insufficient for the needs of video uploads. So we found ones with even more capacity. Then when that wasn't sufficient for all of the needs that we could see, we looked to amplify the Wi-Fi signals in our public facilities and even create new Wi-Fi hotspots throughout neighborhoods where we know we had a demonstrated need. All those together have produced about 96% of students logging on for a number of hours a day to participate in distance learning. And that compares favorably to what we typically see with in-person instruction, with the number of students attending on a daily basis. But our goal is to reach every student and to make sure that that availability of broadband is not a reason why they're not able to participate. And APS is looking to identify the individual cases, work on a case-by-case basis to identify who is being left behind and what's needed to support them. And as part of all of this, we are beginning a study to look at how we make broadband more widely available at lower cost to our affordable housing communities. That study is going to produce a lot of data for us to figure out how we make sure the broadband penetration reaches all who need it. And there's some interesting and positive news on the federal front that we're still trying to unpack. There are dollars that are going to be available. We expect for providing support for families to get internet access. Who will benefit from that in Arlington? We don't quite know yet, given the work that we've done already. But there are, at least in the newest federal relief bill, some funds for that. And as to the question of subscriptions and costs being defrayed for students where needed, most of what students need is provided on an enterprise-wide level from APS. So it is available at no cost. And if there are any specific subscriptions or services that you are interested in, please populate them in the chat, and I'll try to make sure that that's answered before we leave.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey.
Could I just add something real quickly? I think I can speak for maybe the whole board when I say, because behind all of this, often we hear about the internet as a public utility. And I believe all five of us really philosophically think the internet should be a public utility. So, but we're up against a lot of different, issues with Virginia. But that is behind. I would say that's probably a goal for all of us, because that's really the only thing that makes sense. And then, Mr. Dorsey, I see a question in the chat, which I realize I believe we have this training, but I'm not positive. Marcia Semmel asked if there's broadband access training for people across the age spectrum, and what kind of training we have for people to help them get online. And I'm not really sure about the answer to that. I know we do have some things, but I'm not sure. I can't list them all.
We do. There are a variety of things that I'm aware of. Certainly for students, there are a variety of programs that are available for students all throughout elementary, middle, and high school. But then for people in our community at large, there are things that are offered from Arlington County as part of our I believe, is it the Engage program that looks to provide educational opportunities for older adults? There are some technological literacy training and skills building sessions that are available through there. There are other services that are provided from our partner agencies that do periodic technical literacy programs that are offered through other Arlington County initiatives. Whether we're reaching every stage across the lifespan, I'm not entirely sure. There might be sort of a donut hole for people who are in that adult to pre-senior age cohort. The offerings for them might not be plentiful, but if they are connected to our Department of Human Services for workforce support, they have ample access to training on digital literacy that is provided through that.
I would add, pre-pandemic, I think there were some cool programs connecting high school students with adults that needed help. So sort of a cross-generational kind of support system, which was pretty cool. But I'm sure with the pandemic, that's not happening right now.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey and Mr. Dorsey. This is a shared priority, and the county manager has been working hard on it. We want to make additional progress, and as I said, accelerate our progress. But we have worked hard on this. There are some questions as to how best to get it done that are out there, but we are making significant progress. The 500,000, we have some accessibility blasters, and then we have a lot of other, as Mr. Dorsey mentioned, a lot of other ways to work on this. I want to get Mr. Karantonis a chance to talk, and we'll come back to some of these questions in the chat, but I think there was a question with respect to potential renaming that you had, Mr. Karantonis.
Yes, but the question, I think, was a completely different topic. It is about the last year we, starting with the Lee Highway renaming process, which I think is exemplary in all possible ways. And I believe that we have to commend the Highway Alliance and the neighbors along Lee Highway that worked very, very diligently in a very open, transparent, equitable way to look at the name and at the change of the name of this major thoroughfare, and made some absolutely excellent proposals. And we are working through these proposals right now. The county manager has correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in the December meeting, yes, in the December meeting, he has proposed a process where for renaming of streets or other, toponyms in Arlington, that that there will be an advisory commission or an advisory body, and they will be weighing in on these proposals every 2 years, twice a year. And on top of that, for with side plans, with major changes that come with our sector plans, etc., there are renaming requests basically very, very often. So there is a process now in place. It's an ordered process. It gives time and access to everybody who has a stake in this process. And it really, I think it's a very equitable and fair way to approach that. On the county logo, this was a different discussion. And for that, I believe that the understanding matured that this logo was not sustainable anymore. It was offensive for a great deal of Arlingtonians, I believe for the vast majority of Arlingtonians. And once one realizes, myself, I have to say included, once realizes what the logo really was depicting, it was impossible to unsee it. So we have a decision on the table to retire this logo and to replace it. And there will be, and the county manager, we approved a process that the county manager has proposed to open a public process in the next month, and beginning this month, actually, to get ideas about the values, what the logo should represent, how Arlington should be represented in its logo. This is not an easy question; it's a quite complicated question, and gather public input, and then later sit with professionals and work through the proposals, and eventually have a replacement for the Arlington County logo. And after that, the replacement will happen in a gradual way of replacing the logo as it is today printed and presented everywhere, gradually through retiring, and as we have to replace things, as we have to do new, we will be putting the new logo after that. So in the most cost-effective way, but a deliberate way. I think that this is it's of course a symbolic issue, the logo, but it sets the frame for the conversation, and it revealed a lot of issues and a lot of things that Arlingtonians have been thinking but haven't been able to discuss in public until this summer of 2020, where we have this ongoing discussion about racial equity. I do believe that it was a very revealing conversation, and will be a very revealing conversation as we go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. I'm mindful of time, and I want to try and get to the big issues that are out there that you have asked that we have not yet covered. I think maybe, and we will certainly come back. The question that Nancy Springer just put is the one that I was going to suggest we go to, which is, I think, Ms. Garvey, there was a question that went to the task force that the Civic Federation is. We probably each heard from members of the CivFed about ranked choice voting, and there's a couple of questions in there if you want to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reading the question right now about would we consider. I know the ranked choice voting is moving forward. I expect we're going to get there. We've actually our registrar's office is working on that, trying to figure out how much it's going to cost. So we're certainly interested in that. And I think ranked choice voting is really an interesting way to make a lot of decisions. So thank you for bringing that up. And I appreciate the CivFed pushing this forward. The question, and I'll be quick, I think, because and maybe if Eric can get it up in in the chat because, or at least maybe everybody knows, there's a whole list of what you all are looking at in your study of county government. And I think it's great. You asked what to add. If anybody listened to my remarks earlier, you'll know what I'm going to say. The one thing I think we need to add is, should county board member jobs be part-time? And if you think they should be part-time, well, how much? 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week? And if it's that, what do you want us to not do or do? I stated all the things we do, we're kind of available 24/7. We come to events like this. It's late at night. We've had other meetings. We represent regional groups. When there's a crisis, people turn to us for leadership, as they should. I mean, I think this board is doing a great job. This is what we should be doing. We handle, we're ultimately responsible for budgets. If you look at not just Arlington County, but any kind of city councilor in Northern Virginia and county board, responsible for budgets in the millions and billions of dollars. And yet we're supposed to be doing it part-time because we're supposed to have another job. And I just would posit and have for a while that this is totally unreasonable in 2020 for what the service that people need and want from us. And I think what people expect from us is absolutely reasonable. What's unreasonable is to expect that we're able to have another job to support families. So anyway, I would absolutely want to add that. And I appreciate the opportunity to get on my soapbox and talk about it a little bit. Thank you. You asked for a couple of questions about what you should consider. One is cost, which I mentioned earlier. So whatever kind of suggestions you come forward with, if we're going to make any decisions, cost would certainly be important to know about. And then finally, a lot of these decisions will probably need General Assembly approval. So that's something to factor into your thinking. And if we even wanted to implement them, we'd need to get it through the General Assembly. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I know I'm kind of mindful of time. And again, I appreciate being able to get up on the soapbox. And I'm happy to talk about this with anybody anytime. But I think we've got other questions to handle tonight. Thank you. Let me see if there's any more in the chat. Somebody agrees with me. Thank you. Stevenson, I appreciate it.
There are a lot of, several of these questions have subparts, and I want to seek to get to all broadly, or as many of the questions as we can broadly. I had a question about the governor's just released proposed budget amendments. I think, and there was also a question about Metro and federal support that Ms. Crystal may want to touch on. Given the recently passed stimulus, it's different from where we were 2 weeks ago for sure. The proposed budget amendments, this is a very, very tough session in Richmond because there's a limited number of bills allowed. It's all being done electronically. And some of the fiscal decisions, we're in a more constrained fiscal environment in talking with Pat Carroll, our legislative lead. So we will always be interested in funding for eviction prevention and the Housing Trust Fund, funding for social services. And these are stated priorities. Teacher pay raises are also stated priorities, or additional funding for education is a stated priority in the county board's legislative package. So we're interested, but I will say that it's a very difficult environment in which to pass and to pursue some of the governor's proposed suggestions. Certainly he's a big addition, but I want to sort of manage a little bit our expectations as far as what we'll be seeking. Our legislative package is more focused, frankly, on other areas. We have a small issue related to Medicaid with our CSB, but our legislative package is also focused on voting and some of the other issues, and budget related issues are of course important, but not the focal point. Do you want to touch Metro, Katie?
Absolutely. So Appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This has been huge. I want to start by giving credit where it's due. By all accounts, our senator from Virginia, Mark Warner, was instrumental in getting the funding for public transit in general and Metro in specific into that hotly debated congressional stimulus bill. And so, I always try to shout out the other elected officials that made things happen. And so he's been just a great advocate at that table, that compromise table. So the numbers are still fluctuating a little bit. I've been sort of looking at my notes from my last conversations with Virginia's representative, or one of Virginia's 2 representatives to the Metro board. We had heard as high as 800 million for the region. Realistically, it's probably going to be a little bit closer to 500 million for the region, and that includes VRE, the bus systems, and the OmniRide system, which does that long haul commuter bus from Prince William and Point South. WMATA is likely looking in the realm of 320 billion. What's encouraging about that number is that some of you have seen the rather catastrophic forecast for the fiscal 22 budget that more or less gutted Metro Rail and Metro Bus as we know it, to close a gap that is forecasted at about 500 billion. So if we can realize that 320, it's not as simple as simply applying all of that to fiscal 22. And I believe that there'll be some debates ahead among the compact members. We are, of course, as Virginia, merely 1/3 of decision making at Metro. There'll probably be some different outlooks about whether that money should be used up front to offset some of the cuts we're living with now, or those that are forecasted to take effect in February, whether it should be all socked away to avoid cuts beginning in July, which may be, knock wood, around the time folks are comfortable getting back on rail and delivering some fare box recovery so that Metro can get its financial footing back under it that way. So there are some healthy debates ahead. I think, as many of you all know, I serve as chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which is the way that we seek to coordinate ourselves as the Northern Virginia localities. And I know that there is, among the Northern Virginia localities, a strong desire to ensure that when ridership is ready to come back, the service levels are there, so that we don't find ourselves in a set of circumstances where, just as riders are ready to return to work or return in the evening hours, that they're facing 30-minute headways on rails, significant cuts in bus routes, et cetera, as well as just the overall challenges to equity and to the smart growth of Arlington County that those cuts could provide. So in short, the numbers are fluctuating. We've got good teams at Metro and at the Commission analyzing exactly how much is likely to come to WMATA. There will be some debates ahead about the time frame in which those funds are spent. But I do think I can say with confidence that Northern Virginia is working well as a region to express that desire to ensure that the federal relief can be used to lift us out of that ridership collapse and potential downward spiral, so that we don't become trapped in it just as ridership might return.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Mr. Dorsey, did you want to chime in on that one?
Oh, I just wanted to say, in case anybody had the same audio hiccups that I have, the numbers that Ms. Crystal was referencing for Metro and for our region are millions with an M, not billions with a B.
Yes, that's
Millions.
so generous of you to note an audio hiccup rather than an error. It's $500 million is the deficit for fiscal 22, and so we're looking at the hundreds of millions from what was a multi-billion-dollar federal package. Thank you very much, Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you. So, sort of want to do a little bit of I see a couple of questions and want to kind of do a kind of a round of colleagues if there are questions that you or issues you'd really like to get to that we didn't mention. I'll just quickly try and see if I can address Kit Norland's question with respect to climate change. We are focused on this, so I think most of us mentioned this in our remarks. There's not much secret that we're one of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about the Biden administration is just a basic recognition that we have to do more on climate. I also am hopeful from the suggested appointments. We have done, last month, we did a green building incentive policy, which is a significant step forward. We also have the community energy plan and the community energy plan implementation framework. So there are pieces of it. And in our closing remarks, Katie, you can certainly touch on that one. But for now, I'll touch on livability 22202. All of us have been in touch with the 3 civic associations, and our staff has been working regularly with livability 22202. I have more reading to do on some of the reports. They are substantial, but the trade-off between additional revenue from development and negative impacts of development is something that we consider regularly. It's part of our general land use plan assessment. We also look at sector plans, and the costs and benefits of development are a regular piece of our staff's consideration through the LRPC long-range planning. LRPC long-range planning committee, I believe, which does several rounds of discussions for projects and has a role there. So we are always continuing to refine our process. So I'll just leave it there. There are a couple of questions on revenue, but I want to give colleagues a chance to kind of wrap up with touching anything that has not been addressed that you want to make sure you mention. And I don't know, Ms. Garvey, Mr. Carantonis, if you want to start us off, go ahead.
All right, I'll be quick. A quick answer to Steph Pryor's question about glass and recycling. We are going to be doing a whole relook at recycling that we do. If the pandemic hadn't happened, we'd be well into that. So good point. There's a lot that needs to be done on recycling, and it's absolutely on the radar scope. It's absolutely something we want to do. We just weren't able to do it this year. And I would like to talk a little bit, if that's all right, Mr. Chair, on the whole issue of data. There was one question about data. And I don't know if if Eric can get that up in the it was question number 3, because the question asked, will you establish a policy that requires staff to use data in the planning process that will best use limited resources and resolve concerns about misuse of data? So first, using data that best uses limited resources is a best practice for just about everything government does, and we expect that from our staff always. I will say that using data to resolve concerns requires that there's an agreement on the data. And I think sometimes that, we have differences in opinion among stakeholders, and I don't think that means misuse of data. That means there's just a disagreement. And one of the issues that came up is the whole issue of steam restoration, which has been around for about a decade. And our staff actually went to outside consultants to verify their work. I personally have had discussions with regional experts about this, and all of them had supported our staff's conclusion. So my conclusion about, after years, and I assume our boards too, after years of these discussions, the data is not being misused. There's simply a disagreement about the professional judgment of our staff, and that's a very different thing. And then again, on the Tischler Beisch, since I answered the question way early on, I got a note from our attorney because I sent him a little text, and actually it should be ready in a few months. A few months is what the kind of timeline for that. Finally, on data and equity, I really appreciate that question. So I want to just sort of thank the Civic Federation. Data is absolutely, I believe, key to how we're going to close race-based outcome gaps. Data helps reveal things that have been hidden by the kind of traditional way we approach things. That's what part of what makes racism systemic is it's built into everything. You don't see it. So it's absolutely imperative that we use the racial equity lens, and we use data and tools that we've got to disaggregate the data to identify where there are systemic and institutional racism that it kind of shows itself, and the changes that we need to make to dismantle it. So data is absolutely crucial with that. The county manager and staff are working on a new racial equity data dashboard to better understand. So that will be coming out soon. County manager, has articulated his commitment to objective data-based planning efforts. And finally, I really just want to take this opportunity to thank the many Civic Federation members who have been participating in the dialogues on race and equity. and the assessment we've been doing, this initial body of work is going to do a lot to help inform our actions moving forward. This is a long-term effort. It requires everybody's, sort of commitment and work over time. And thank you so much, the Civic Federation, for being part of that, because you're absolutely a crucial part of it. So thank you. So I'm going to just end with a thank you, and that's it. Thank you. Thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Sure. Thank you. I'm getting used to saying Ms. Garvey instead of Madam Chair. You are still a chair in part of my mind. Mr. Karantonis.
Yeah, I want to also thank the Civic Federation for this session today. I think it's a very good tradition to uphold and to have a conversation about what our current policy positions are, where Arlington is today, and how we look at the next year. I just want to make a couple of footnotes. Ms. Garvey mentioned, our immediate past chair, mentioned data. Not only do we use data, of course we do use data, but we also make them available to everybody to see them. There is we have a website for that. It's data.arlingtonva.us. I think it's very interesting for those of you who want to tinker a little bit and download a few bigger data sets and work with them. I think they are very, very valuable. And they actually promote and sustain a healthy community dialogue. The questions that we get when they are data informed, when they are based in analysis, that doesn't mean that we will always agree and that staff will always, having the same data set doesn't mean always that we will come to the same conclusion on policy questions. So I'm just saying that we are working hard, and I believe that the county manager has committed to that. And I believe that he's making, and his team are making progress to make as much raw data, as many data as possible available. And this is really important when it begins also on the neighborhood level. So, our traffic data, our housing data, our, a lot of data sets are being made more and more available and more usable for people. For me, the next year, there is clearly one additional focus for me, and I believe that the Civic Federation can play a significant role. It's the new accessibility of our public and consultation and advisory process. We talked a lot this year about equity. We talked a lot about civic leadership, and I believe that this needs to penetrate also in how we how in the governance of our neighborhoods, in the way our neighborhoods are represented, in the way many of you are participating in this Arlington, in the Arlington way. We have a lot of work to do this 2021. We did a lot of diagnostics during 2020. So now it's the time of, converting what we found into actionable steps forward. And I believe that this will be happening, and I'm happy to have your partnership of that. And somebody asked what we can do, what everybody can do to help us with Metro and with, sustaining and rescuing these elementary infrastructural systems. This is a call for you to advocate for them. Ms. Crystal mentioned today that Senator Warner worked very hard for that. It would be great for the Civic Federation to write a thank you to that, to the senator, and reiterate their commitment to support this. This is really critical for Arlington. Everybody needs to hear how important it is. One thing that Ms. Crystal didn't mention, because it's the depressing datum, is that the ridership has fallen down 95%. In the case of the bus system, somewhere between 75 and 80%. This is, she used the verb, the characterization catastrophic. Yes, it is. And it is absolutely unsustainable, I can tell you that as well. So we need to go through this 2021 knowing how big and the order of magnitude of these challenges. And you are part of the active citizenship in citizenry in Arlington can be of great help in this.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Mr. Dorsey, did you want any closing thoughts, remarks, questions we haven't gotten to?
I'll be very brief since it seems inappropriate to close a conversation with the Civic Federations since our relationship is ongoing. So I'll say, President Gajahar, thank you for inviting us to your meeting tonight to give this preview and overview, but I look forward to working with delegates and guests to this meeting on issues that arouse your passion, interest, and curiosity. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Ms. Crystal.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be very brief, but I do want to see if I can't sneak in one more answer, because there is a great question from Tina Warden in the chat, and something I've been really heartened to see CivFed take up as a priority in recent years, 18 months or so, has been the focus on the arts in Arlington. And I think for all of us who consider ourselves patrons or lovers of the arts, or just care about an Arlington that is a soulful and special place to live, this has been top of mind. And so I just wanted to speak really briefly. And one of the things I wanted to do to respond to Tina's question is to share a website with resources for artists and arts groups that our team has been working to compile, everything from webinars to grant application opportunities to other supports, which I think if you know, love, or are part of an arts organization, that may be a helpful link for you. But most importantly, I mean, I think, of course, the thing we've heard of from a lot of our arts organizations is just the need for resources, flexibility of resources, new resources. So just to highlight at a high level, one of the major steps that our team took pretty quickly in partnership with the Arlington Commission for the Arts and with the board's support was converting project grants, which are generally tied to sort of a specific creative output, whether it's a show or a season, into just general operating grants. So really lifting the restrictions that could have prevented that flexibility right away. The small business emergency grant assistance, which has been really important for a lot of our restaurant, hospitality industry and others, has also been really important for a lot of arts groups. Over half a dozen, ranging from the Arlington Arts Center to Encore and Priyo Bangla, and many other groups have been recipients of that small business emergency grant assistance program as well. There are a few other things that our Arlington Arts team is working on, chiefly in the area of helping provide resources to support our smaller arts groups in streaming. Those who have been able to adapt have generally been the ones that have been able to move their content online. And that's something that we think the county can play a role in helping have that streaming technology and supports, so that every group doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. So sorry, that was my brief bird walk down a question that's really important, close to my heart, and I suspect to many folks with us tonight. A sincere thanks to the CivFed. This is, I imagine, our first ever virtual meeting with you all, but it's happened really smoothly, and I think is a credit to the passion of this group and the effectiveness of your chair and president's leadership, and I suspect the leadership of the whole executive board in transitioning online. So it's been a pleasure. My hope for the new year is that before too long we will be, seeing you all drinking punch in the back of a county meeting in some form or fashion. I'm really looking forward to being able to do that again, and hope to do all that we can to hasten that day. So thanks again.
Thank you, Katie, and Ms. Crystal. And I just want to briefly add my thanks. All of colleagues, and really, I think it's the right note to start and to end on. And Ms. Crystal started with it after I jumped right into the policy discussion. So I want to reiterate thanks. There is one question that we haven't answered that I will was in the chat that I'll just briefly mention. It's regarding finances in our county auditor, and that is one is about resources. I do want to let everyone know that our current budget, the manager is asking for proposals for cuts to every department. Of it's, I don't think it's a state secret. It's a significant percentage, not 10%, but it's right up there. 6% is asking for cuts. So because of the challenges we're facing with respect to our budget as a whole, so that is a relevant consideration to the additional revenue. We have continued to work with our auditor, and we will continue to work to see how we can realize savings. Part of our audit structure is a collaborativeness that leads to long-term policy changes in specific areas. So we are continuing to work there, and I will have to sort of leave it there. And there will be additionally, Mr. Karantonis and Mr. Dorsey will be working with the audit committee. I do want to give Mr. Gajahar, Alan, I want to give you the last thought, other than just to reiterate the thanks for the partnership. I know that there's been 50 or 70 in our boardroom for this the last couple of years, but I'm not sure that 74 have stayed this long. And I would say this is an indication that virtual meetings do have some benefits. We tried to get to every one of your questions, or as many of your questions as we could. So with that, thanks. And the note, I can't help but noticing, because my cursor is right at Lois Kuntz's kind thought about civility and collegiality. And I'll send it to you, President Gajahar.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chairman Ferranti, Ms. Garvey, Mr. Karantonis, Mr. Dorsey, and Ms. Crystal for joining us. This is an excellent tradition. I'm glad to continue to be part of it. I think this worked very well on Zoom. This new feature, being able to spotlight multiple people, is a new thing. I thought that was pretty cool too. And we really appreciate your thorough answers to almost every question that we posed. And we look forward, and I'll speak on behalf of the committee chairs and all the members as well, to continue engagement with you and your staff to address our shared mission, the improvement and betterment of the life here in Arlington on behalf of all of our citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
And I'm just moving the spotlight.